There's a vast amount of racism in American film, but this might be one of the most racist films we've done.
No, the religion is actually just manipulating people and leading people into unjust wars for no good reason other than keep the rich rich. Whoa, man, mind blown.
But you're not thinking like a capitalist there.
I'm not. That's always been my problem.
It's a nice liberal nationalist movie where the president can go blow up aliens with a jet fighter, and yet you're still not actually being xenophobic. It's kind of amazing.
The whole QAnon universe, I was like, this seems ripe for them to grab onto one of these two movies and totally miss the point.
Yes.
And they have.
You know, the best they really have is like gentrification and real estate speculation in hospitals.
Yeah, that's Cleveland in a nutshell right there.
Fuck capitalism. Fuck all of this stuff. It is a movie that should be watched by organizers and radicals and leftists and anybody who wants to make a better world. This movie, on the other hand, means none of those things.
It's a Franken blockbuster, like you said, and it's put together in sequences that play out like movie trailers.
Really regressive gender politics, like incredible, but to the point of near parody.
No, Norm, George Wendt in this movie definitely would have been wearing a MAGA hat if this movie was made nowadays.
Oh, God, right? And then convince the workers to break their own picket.
Yeah.
Fuck this movie. It's,
Damn, I wish this movie was better, because that's a kick-ass ending.
This is a paint-by-numbers propaganda movie that completely works because the characters are compelling and real.
Welcome all to the Politics of Cinema. On this show, we believe films are never neutral. There's a political as well as an artistic message captured in every film, in every country, in every time period. And we here are on the lookout for all of it. My name is Aaron Spears.
And my name is Isaac Miller. And on this episode, we are not looking at contemporary cinema, which is what we've been doing for a while. But we are looking back at Charles Burnet's Killer of Sheep from 1978. And, you know, this is in part... we did this last year. This is part of our sort of Black History Month coverage in a way, right? I mean, this is the sort of movie we'd do anyway, but I think we sort of waited on it a little bit. And it's a movie I know I've been looking forward to seeing for a long time.
Oh, same here. Yeah, it's since it got I think in film geek circles, the restoration and re-release back in the mid 2000s. I was like, oh, I need to see that movie. And, took me a minute to get there.
I mean, Charles Burnet is one of the great American directors of the post-war period, right? Could we say that?
Yeah.
And I think among film people, maybe he's seen that way, but, it's not filtered out.
Well, so I was kind of wrestling with that as I was looking through his film. Like I watched the movie and then I was looking through his filmography. I mentioned on the last episode, the only thing I'd seen of his was The Glass Shield and the short that we watched back in our 60s coverage.
Yeah.
Totally drawing a blank on the title now. Several Friends,
yeah.
Yeah. Which is weird because that one was clearly he made it back then, but if you look at the credit for it on IMDb, it's 2009. So I think there's a couple things going on with his filmography. One, you get something like Killer Sheep as your debut film. Like I put it immediately up there with like Who's That Knocking at My Door? Scorsese's first feature, because again, it's like very similar, like, oh, it made it as a master's project, that sort of thing. But it also has like such a power and immediacy, and it just also announces like a film talent, like clearly.
Right.
But we haven't been watching Killer of Sheep since 1978. The general public has only seen it since like the 2000s. So that kind of stunts your career a little bit, potentially, or at least not your career, because he has an amazing and very diverse career, but he doesn't have the career in the general film culture that I think he should have, or that he deserves to have. But then also, as you go through it, he's not just making, feature film after feature film, like operating in one kind of, I want to say genre, but that's not, you know what I mean? Like he's making TV movies, he's making shorts, he's making documentaries, he's working on TV series. And some of which, like I said, he makes, as a college project, but then nobody gets to see it in the general public till 2009. And music videos, I think he's even has in there as well. Like he's in production, he's filming a movie right now that comes out in 2023 is the schedule.
Wow, really?
Yeah. It's listed as confidential policing documentary, which, yeah, please give me the Charles Burnet policing documentary. Absolutely.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of the story of Bill Gunn.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. I mean, Bill Gunn was more of a playwright or, guy, and he acted, and also, so it's not quite the same. But I think it's noticeable that, so basically, I mean, the thing with Bill Gunn is that his most famous movie, Ganja and Hess, basically gets trashed by its producers and distributors, and only gets put back together in the 90s, I believe, after he died.
I think that's the story, yeah.
And, he's got a few other movies and some acting credits and some writing credits. Mm-hmm. I was planning on watching The Angel Levine this month. But it's just not a lot. And I think Charles Burnett has a fuller directorial career. For one thing, he's lived longer.
Well, that helps.
And, I think, it's not quite the same thing, but definitely you see this with sort of, I feel like you see this with Black auteurs more.
It's almost like there's a lot of doors not open if you're a Black auteur trying to work in Hollywood or get financing.
It's almost as if, but that would just be a total conspiracy. That couldn't possibly be the case.
There's another element as well where, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't really read up too much on Bill Gunn since watching Ganja and Hess. So it's been a few years since I read up on Bill Gunn, but Charles Burnett and the filmmakers that he, I will say, came of age with, we'll be mentioning the LA Rebellion at UCLA as part of our coverage here with Killer Sheep, but the filmmakers that he went to school with, which is where I'm saying he came of age as a filmmaker at UCLA in this LA Rebellion era, they were specifically kind of against the trend at the time, which was blaxploitation. So you could, because I know like Ganja and Hess, I think if I remember correctly, was like tried to be marketed as blaxploitation.
So Ganja and Hess was supposed to be another Blackula.
Oh, that's what it was. You're right. Yes.
And so what he did is, since nobody was really watching, sort of checking over what he was doing, he sort of just made his own black vampire art film instead.
Yeah, he did.
So, and then they cut it up and turned it into mincemeat. But so that's part of what was going on there.
So, like, if you wanted to play ball within Hollywood in that time period, like he's shooting Charles Burnett is shooting Killer of Sheep as a graduate student in film in 72, 73. You're right smack in the middle of it at that point. Yeah. Sorry, of blaxploitation. Like, I just watched Coffee the other day again, the 73. Like, this will make money. This is what studios want. And then if you come in, I'm maybe half remembering stuff from film history classes here, but like if you're coming in as a Black director trying to get financing, which I realize Burnett wasn't trying to do for Killer Sheep. He was doing that on his own as a film student. But like, hey, if you want to play ball, these are the types of movies you want to make. I'm not interested in those kind of movies. Like, okay, well, we're not giving you money. This is the only thing that we're selling to Black audiences right now, as I'm role playing Hollywood right now in general.
Yeah.
And, like I said, Bill Gunn, same thing. We're like, well, fuck, like that's not what I'm making. Like, it doesn't have to be another Blackula. It could just be another exploration of like this idea of a vampire.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, he wants to do something a little more interesting. I mean, Blackula is great. Actually, this is not a dump on Blackula. Both. Mm-hmm.
I would say, or blaxploitation in general. There's a lot of great films in that genre, but that doesn't have to be the only thing that
caters to a Black audience or that Black artists can do.
Right. Where are the musicals at? Come on. I meant from that era. I realize that actually exists, but I just meant,
Yeah. But so Charles Burnett let's talk about like Charles Burnett. I mean, we sort of mentioned that he's a great director and so forth, but let's, what does he come out of?
So there's a thing at UCLA in the, what is this, like late 60s, I would say mid to late 60s. I believe there's actually some credit to affirmative action here as, hey, you need to get, you need to have a more diverse student body here. So there ended up being this wave of Black students to go into the UCLA film program. Let's see, Burnett got his master's in 67. I mean, he came out of a kind of an arts background anyway, but within this LA Rebellion era, which it wasn't, I don't think it was called that at the time. I think it was kind of named afterwards. It was kind of this coalition of African-American filmmakers that went through this program. So you've got Charles Burnett in there. You've got Julie Dash, who would make a huge splash in the film world with Daughters of the Dust. You've got Larry Clark in there. Jama Fanaka is one of my faves from this time period. All coming out. They have a disdain for the blaxploitation trends of the day. They're film students. They're film geeks. They swap out roles on each other's films. So if you look at the filmographies, there's a lot of overlap. Where like Charles Burnet is cinematography on this, short that Julie Dash makes. Jama Fanaka ends up he's the editor on this thing that Larry Clark. There's just all these overlap because you're coexisting as film students,
right?
So they swap out roles for that. But then also, which like I went through film school to study film theory, history, criticism, but the production friends I know at the time, they all did that. Like you swap out because you have friends that know your taste, know your style, know what you're looking for. And also you don't have money to hire people. It's just got to be your classmates. So that's interesting. Like all the way that they overlap early on in their career and inspire each other, I think is really, really heartening. And it was like, oh, hey, I recognize that. Any art school ideally is going to have that. The fact that you get kind of a movement out of it is like, oh my God, that's like the dream. I would say. But what they did then also was they took their time going through working on their master's projects, because while they were in school, keep in mind, this is the 60s. This is the late 60s. This is not the digital video era. No one's shooting with a cell phone. This is 16 millimeter, probably some 8 millimeter mixed in their film stock that costs money to buy in the first place, to process, and then also to edit. So that's to say nothing of actual equipment. If you and I, Isaac, were just trying to make a movie in late 1960s, we'd have to be renting equipment. Well, as long as you're a film student, you can just check out the equipment and use their editing equipment there as part of being a student. So the story goes that most of them kind of took their time with their projects because, hey, this allows us to have free access to equipment as well, which, you know what? Fine by me. We get some amazing works out of this.
So, it's sort of, it's interesting. So they're sort of holding out. I mean, how common was that for people to sort of hold out that long, I wonder?
I'm not sure. I know I referenced Scorsese already, just being one of my favorite American directors. I've read a lot about him. But like you're not working in Isaac, you've been through grad school. You're working on a PhD right now. The work takes a minute. And if you're also working in an artistic medium, like Killer of Sheep as an example, like he shot it like on weekends for like a little over a year.
Right.
If you're doing a feature film, which first of all is wildly ambitious for a film student in a master's program, like I'm going to make a feature. Like, I'm glad you did, but holy shit, that's quite an undertaking. But yeah, like that's going to take time. So I don't know if that's one of those anecdotes that's more like, they lingered around just to have access to the equipment longer, or like, well, that's just how long it took to make the art I'm making. But also think about this late 60s time period too. This is an era in film school where on record, like Julie Dash, I know Jama Fanaka, Larry Clark, specifically though Charles Burnet as well, big Italian neorealism fans.
Yeah.
And in the late 60s, you've got kind of the the proliferation, I would say, of like campus film societies. And also this is the first, second-ish wave now also of film schools that are teaching this. So you have access to screenings at film schools. You have access to screening at campus film societies. I don't know within UCLA, but I'm going to go ahead and assume in the LA area, there were some art house theaters they could get to see movies as well. And I think you can definitely see on screen 100% in Killer of Sheep, he's an Italian neorealism fan.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I think that's sort of what's pointed out about it.
Yeah.
I've got to admit, I'm bad on my Italians.
I have too. Italian neorealism never really grabbed me in film school, so I saw a few things there, but I've not really sought it out afterwards. But I have a question for you guys about this time period as far as, well, it's UCLA, but just sort of like the campus environment in general. One of the things I kept running across and doing some research was this was an era where there was a lot of, they kept saying ethno studies programs started.
This is part of the wave of the civil rights movement and Black Power and sort of anti-racist movements in general is one of the things that's being struggled for on campuses. And of course, they still exist to this day, is centers for the study of, of different groups, right? Because, these are not things, this is a weird example, and this is not actually an example of this, but is Frederick Douglass just somebody that everybody knows?
Probably by name, I guess, at least.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't true before like the 50s or something.
Oh, okay.
Like, maybe for Black people or, educated Black people or whatever, people who paid attention to but like, it's not, so part of it is that like the study, like by and large, the serious study of other group, of the non-normative white male, whatever. I mean, like this. So this, you have to study racism. You have to study all these things. Yeah, this is a very big thing in this period, and of course, we still live with the results of it, and it's still fought over. Mm-hmm. If you look at what the right is doing right now, right? I mean, critical race studies. I'm probably stretching things a little bit, but you could say critical race studies probably doesn't exist, right, without these things, and the right is freaking out about that, right? They don't. The center liberals are like okay with this stuff as long as it doesn't rock the boat, and the right wants it to literally just not exist at all. So these are programs that are won through struggle.
Right. I was gonna say the freakouts that I'm seeing in like the weirdo hate groups I keep an eye on the right are all like they're worried that it's in third grade classrooms. You're like, what are you talking about? This is like a college level area of study. Like nobody in third grade is teaching critical race theory. It's not a thing, but it's an easy political boogeyman to get everybody all freaked out about.
It's a PhD. Yeah.
Like there's no like third grader in your fucking Texas elementary school learning about critical race theory.
But part of what they really mean, they're using that as a proxy for any discussion of race.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's still dangerous what they're doing. I didn't mean to like make it seem just overtly comical, but there is an overtly comical element to it in my head. The next step's just going to be like, oh, well, we got to get this out of the college programs now too, or whatever. Who knows?
They're working on it.
Yeah. So that's part of it. So I think you've got an environment of collaborative artists working through film school in the late 60s, this LA Rebellion group. Again, that label came a little bit later. I don't think they were calling themselves that at the time. But then you also on their campuses, then like you have these different ethno studies programs popping up that they may or may not be taking classes of, or they may be just around other students that are taking them. So you're having kind of a different kind of historical context in your education process outside of just the arts that you're studying as well, which I think definitely has informed what I've seen of the films coming out of the LA Rebellion, which isn't a ton, but I think it's very present there. I think all these different filmmakers too do things in very different ways. Like of the limited Charles Burnet films I've seen, I don't get a sense of what Charles Burnet's sense of humor is. Like he's going very much in that Italian neorealism. John Mafanaka has a serious hard-edged sense of humor in his movies. I
think the closest thing to the sense of humor in these movies actually might be some of the needle drops.
That could be, yeah.
So he uses Paul Robeson a number of times.
Yes,
right?
He does.
And I think quite well. But there's a scene where it's the song, which is sort of about like gathering together with friends or something, is juxtaposed against sheep in a slaughterhouse.
Yes. Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, okay.
That might be something.
Yeah.
There's some of the scenes with the little girl who is probably not acting. So the young daughter in the film, the family that the film is about, which we haven't even said what it's about yet. She's pretty amusing, but she's amusing in sort of the way little kids are.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's basically it's mostly full of non-actors. So yeah, when you have like what is like a 5-year-old maybe, like this is not a child actor. This is her.
Right. This is just her being goofy. Like her singing along. I bet there's a very cute scene where she's singing along to a pop song.
Yep.
And I'm sure that's just like maybe that's something he planned out, but kind of suspect it's something she just does.
Yeah, or it just was happening. He's like, "Ooh, hey, roll film. Let's grab this or something." But also, I mean, not that all of the movie is like accents like that. It is very deliberate. But also, that's also quality filmmaking. You have the right environment on set. You see a moment and you grab it. Well, before we jump in on like kind of a quick little plot synopsis and discuss the film a little more in detail, there was one last note I had on the LA Rebellion and these filmmakers, some of their approach to stories. And Charles Burnet specifically, I think he's even mentioned this in interviews since making Killer of Sheep. But he has said that he really likes having a focus on the working class because he finds it a great way to highlight what he said was the economic conflict within the African-American family. And I thought that's really interesting, and it's fully on display in Killer of Sheep.
So within the African-American family?
Yes.
Interesting.
So just, like economics as a force for, or as a potential force for conflict within the family. And I think it's specifically, it's not like the plot of this movie, but it's definitely there. It's kind of all around the edges of every scene in this particular movie.
Well, I mean, I think this is a movie about depression.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. And, what is the source of that depression?
I don't have a quick answer for you. I mean, it's kind of the whole movie.
Yeah, it's kind of the whole movie. Well, let's dig in and see if we can figure it out. What is this movie about that we keep referencing?
So I cobbled together a plot synopsis from a few different sources and then edited them because it's not really it's somewhat of a linear narrative. It starts off with a flashback, but the rest of it, like I assume it kind of all occurs like in a time order, but it's also not really important. It's really a series of amazing vignettes, almost of varying length based on how long that vignette needs to happen. It's all set in Watts, an urban, mostly African-American section of Los Angeles. Stan, the lead character, the father, the husband, he spends his days toiling away in a slaughterhouse. His profession seeps into his personal life as he struggles to keep his family afloat, financially, but also emotionally. Other life situations also prove to be difficult, since it seems that dark intentions kind of lurk within the people he's kind of around outside of his family as well. So you're never sure like what direction he may end up being pulled into. And so all we're doing, we're really just watching all these different layers of stress that are piled on top of Stan and his family and how they process and deal with all of those.
You are not a child anymore. You soon will be a goddamn man. You start learning what life is about now, son.
Come on, be a man, stand up. Don't you know it's more to it than just with your fists? The scars on your mug, you talking about an animal or what? No, you think you're still in the bush some damn where? You here, you use your brain.
Man, I ain't poor. Look, I give away things to the Salvation Army. You can't give away nothing to the Salvation Army if you poor.
I just got those sad lovers blues. I've been around all over town.
I mean, it does, it feels like in a lot of ways what we're seeing is the pressure. Here he is. He's in an industrial job, right? Mm-hmm. He works in he slaughters sheep, and it's a single breadwinner home.
Yeah.
Like his wife does not work.
And it's set in the time it's taking place. Like he's filming it in 72, 73. That's when it's set also.
Well, but didn't it come out in 70? Oh, but it came out in 78, but it's filmed in 73. That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think of it as a 73 movie. I mean, this is very much like, the strains of sort of like the strains of the sort of industrial, I want to say industrial working class, but a certain part of it, right? Mm-hmm. What he's trying to be is sort of a solid industrial working class family that sort of like can make pretensions to middle classness, right?
Right.
But he's nowhere near that. I mean, he has this whole speech at one point saying that, he's not poor. And what's going on is that he's trying to get an engine for his car, right? He wants to do something extra. And his friend is saying, you don't have the money for this. And he's like, I do. I am not poor.
And one way that he really puts a button on that is like his examples that he donates to the Salvation Army, which I thought was interesting. His definition of not being poor was that he has extra to donate to maybe those that are in his head. He
has slack.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, his other example of somebody who's actually poor is somebody who's literally eating weeds.
Oh, yeah, he does reference that. Yeah.
So part of it is, this is a movie where he is going through, he's sort of interacting with his friends, but in a very depressed manner. He's not really like dynamic with any of them. And he's having insomnia.
Yeah.
He can't sleep. Basically his relationship with his wife is under a lot of strain. She doesn't give him a hard time, right? She's really affectionate, I feel like, and actually is like aware that he's really in trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
But she wants to have sex. He can't really do that. They have this. I think you mentioned it earlier, maybe before we started recording. But there's a scene where they're dancing to what is it? Yes. The Bitter Earth. And she's getting into it. She's feeling romantic. She's starting to kiss him.
Yeah.
And he can't react.
Right. And then when the song's done, he just like walks away.
Right.
Oh, what a scene.
Yeah, and he walks away. I mean, looking at her like, I mean, he's aware, right? He's not, he's aware that this isn't how it, should be, but it is where he is. He can't do better than this.
Well, so something that comes up, and I think he portrays it really, really skillfully in this movie is, but there's like a parental fatigue that can really set in. I was just thinking back in my own life of like working a second shift job. My partner was working a high school math teacher, so like up very early. But when we first had kids and they were infants, it was like you give up having a full night's sleep,
right? And
after a while, you're just like, okay, I haven't seen my partner in days. Like, and there is a priority to that. But this guy on top of it has like you said, sole breadwinner. So his job itself is physical and demanding. And also, as the resident vegetarian here, it's gross to watch because you see slaughtering going on.
I feel like I've seen grocer slaughterhouses.
I have too.
And
I know. And the title of the movie, I knew it was coming, but I was like, oh God, this is so great. I just, I'm like, I've seen the PETA videos. I don't need to see this again, but fine. It's good. But it shows, it's not quite as bad as the killing floor necessarily, but it's a physically demanding job and it's exhausting. And then when he gets done and he comes home, he's got labor at work, but then he also has all this labor at home. We see him doing sink repair. He's putting down linoleum. He's trying to fix the car. Like there's always something physically demanding his energy.
Right.
And I guess that just leaves you with nothing left at a certain point, emotionally and energy level wise.
There's no outlet. And this is the thing is that like he does relax with his friends. He spends times with them, but it doesn't seem to unstress him at all. There seems to always be some level of pressure. The one point where he tries to do this, which is sort of souping up his car, where he tries to sort of like create some space, right?
Yeah.
His friend is basically not willing to push the engine that they've bought far enough back into the truck, and it immediately falls and breaks.
Well, there's a great build up to this too, because like you said, it starts off with the "I'm not poor" speech that he mentioned. Not speech, but like the conversation he has with his friend, and then you see it like moment by moment. Like they, he's got a little bit of extra money. Then like they go to the place where the engine's at. They're physically like carrying down the steps. It looks heavy as shit. I've seen other movies where like they have actual equipment that will lift the engine and then drop. Like they don't have that. Like they're just have to. How do you physically move this engine from point A to point B?
Right.
And they do. They get it into a truck, and his friend's like, it's good enough. It's heavy. It'll stay. So they don't secure it. They don't shove it back in. And as soon as they hit the gas, it falls out and breaks. All that work.
For nothing.
And they, just leave it. No, there's that also translates to like, well, I spent money on it. Now it's broken. So that might be no working car. That might not be some extra food. That could be a financial hit to them.
Right. So part of it is that is their margin, right? That is his margin for a little bit of pleasure, and it's gone. There's no coming back from that. It's not going to come back. So like, I mean, I had the feeling that there's all this stuff and his job, right? His job is a difficult industrial job.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know if it's, I mean, one of the scenes that sort of where you see him maybe starting to come back a little bit is, so his wife wanted him to come to bed to have sex and he can't do it or is trying to, I can't remember, maybe it's not that, she's trying to show him affection. And he's just not able to do it. And his daughter comes up, this little girl, and puts her hand on his face. And that is one of the scenes where you can sort of see something breaking through for him.
Yeah, I think he smiles.
Yeah, he actually smiles.
Yeah.
And she's sort of watching that.
At that point in the movie, you're like, I don't know if I've seen him smile. Like, that was my thought.
Right. I mean, this is something that sort of breaks through
a
little bit for him because it's so, it's really charming, right?
They're sitting in their kitchen, which he's fixed the sink, he's put down linoleum, and his wife was saying about how like, you look exhausted or whatever. She's like, well, let's go to bed. Like it's pretty clear. And he's just kind of like, there's no energy, like let alone like a spark right now. He's just like completely beat down. But yeah, there's a little spark when, his daughter shows up.
We're sort of just talking about him, but of course this is like the profile of a neighborhood. There's all of his friends. There's the people who are basically in crime. Like somebody tries to recruit him into helping out kill somebody. You've got friends who are sort of like, or sort of in his sort of position, but not doing as well. And then of course there's all the stuff with his son and the kids playing around the neighborhood. There's children everywhere, right? Everywhere.
This was some of the most striking the striking element to me. And I don't know if it's because the movie just started off with it. Because like the opening scene is kids playing in just this dirt field with just, rocks and chunks of wood. Or maybe it's being a children's librarian and just around kids during the day. Like that just draws my attention when I'm watching films too. But you're watching children at play in just this abandoned kind of dirt field with I feel like there's some old industry or something there.
Right.
An old abandoned house or something like that. But they have a plank of wood and they're throwing rocks at each other.
Yes.
There's an element of danger to it. So it was okay, but also that's what kids do. You don't realize, if I actually hit my friend with this rock, that could really do something.
Well, and when somebody actually gets hurt, they stop.
Right.
And they check on him.
This guy, I'm well, you're as an adult watching, you're you're throwing rocks at each other. This is how this ends.
We know exactly how this is going to end every single time.
I was just going to say, moments later, they're still out playing, and there's it's near a train yard, and this train is not moving. It's like a solo boxcar just sitting there. But one of the kids lays out on the track with his head right next to the wheel. Visually, you're Jesus Christ! It's not moving. It's not going to move. But there's still an element of danger to that.
Oh, I was actually assuming something horrible was going to happen. I was just oh my gosh, this is bad. This is bad. But part of it is that this is what, it reminds me of my grandpa in the 30s, it's a certain degree things that I might have done. We ran around the neighborhood, but we were much more limited. And now you have kids and, I don't actually know if there's a class differential here, a class to a certain degree racial, but class differential in what kids do or don't do. We are told that now kids don't have any reign and we're much more protective, but within our society in general, right?
Yeah, depends on where you're at, I think, but yeah,
I think it depends on where you're at and who you're dealing with. But that's a general. But that tends to be sort of a middle class thing.
Yeah.
So so you get this sense of a neighborhood in which everyone is sort of on the edge economically, right? This is a poor to working class neighborhood, right?
Well, and I think maybe that's why I think the kids are a great setup for that.
Right.
As you mentioned when we were talking about on Plan B, a texture and it's a story of a place,
right?
And it's very grounded, kind of geographically. We don't, to my recollection of the movie, we don't ever really see any of the kids playing with a toy.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You know what I mean? It's not can I, let's go play Transformers or whatever. Again, like you said, that also speaks to class and disposable income. Also, I don't think Transformers are around in the early 70s, but you get my idea. They're playing with what is around them, which is at one point they're just throwing rocks at this abandoned house, seeing how far up the house they can hit or break out a window. The one kid has a piece of string that he's just I think they have a top. He's spinning a top at one point, I guess. So there's one.
Yeah, that is a toy.
Yeah. But then in another scene, you see them at the, I think it's an apartment complex that's nearby. They're jumping from rooftop to rooftop of apartment buildings.
I don't understand the problem here.
It's then they're climbing up the side and they're walking around on a canopy or an overhang at one point. And it's just another little element of, none of them fall, but it's another element of just danger.
And one of the kids does get hurt, not from falling or anything, and they sort of linger on him crying for a little bit. And it's an interesting shot. I don't totally know the logic of all of it, but I feel like this is a movie that I want to go through and forensically figure out why every shot's there.
Well, the kid stuff, I feel like I've got an idea on that one. Also, I went through it kind of almost twice, and the second time through, I was this is one of those movies that once you've sort of experienced it once, because this isn't a narrative with a twist ending or anything like that. You just kind of have to live with these characters the first time through, and then you kind of notice a lot more nuance. As you go through a second or third time. No, the opening scene is actually a flashback to Stan, the husband, the father character, when he was.
Yes.
And the father, who's off camera, it really just holds on this one kid who we realize later is Stan, is getting a lecture about not standing up for his little brother who got hurt out playing or whatever in the neighborhood. And hey, if you can't stand up for him, you come back and get me, and I'll take care of it. And it's sort of, it's interesting because the speech is overtly about you're old enough to be a man now. You got to start acting like it.
Right.
To a child, but you get the idea. So at his childhood, at Stan's childhood, there clearly was like this element of danger around, not from like I can't remember if that scene was like a bully or not, like, but it was just like they're out being kids, and yes, there is an element of danger to that when you're just like playing in an abandoned, field or around a train car, or jumping from roof to roof.
Well, but part of what's interesting about it to me is, I mean, there's that element of danger, but part of what's going on there is you see. So here's the thing: he's this person who's driven toward sort of responsibility in a way, right?
Yeah.
Like he's got this job, he's got this thing, he's sort of going for this particular type of lifestyle in a way, and barely holding on. There's this scene where his friends are trying to literally get him to be involved in a murder, and his wife comes out and just digs into them. And they're like, well, look, but is he getting ahead on this, right?
Right.
How are things going? And you can see sort of that in the childhood scene, you can see that being that attitude that he has, that that the sort of the need to be responsible, the need to be
right
on top of these things is being
right.
is being pushed on him there. So I think part of it is that he's got a deeper psychology. He hasn't always been depressed. Obviously, his wife, they're making references to when he wasn't feeling this way.
Right.
And he isn't always like this. But we are also dealing with, I think we're dealing with some of the long-term pressures of trying to survive under these structural conditions, right?
And living up to a certain ideal that's imprinted very early on him by his dad.
Yeah. I think that is part of what's going on.
That scene with the guys in the neighborhood trying to recruit him for criminal activities was fascinating to me because it was kind of funny at first. Because if you watch Stan the entire time, he's just sitting on his front steps. He doesn't stand up at all. The two guys show up and they're like, "Hey, you still got?" I think they ask him if he still has like a gun or something, and they're trying to recruit him for this, like, we'll just say shenanigans they're about to get up to. Maybe they're just talking shit. I don't know. But then his wife is kind of around, and then she hears him. That she comes out and gives him a piece of her mind, which you're like, yeah, that's the logical thing to do right now. That's what he should.
Please make sure that your husband does not get involved in this.
But he also, like, in my opinion, like, he seems like he clearly wasn't going to be. He was like, he doesn't even stand up to like, he's just there, just like, and then as she's giving them what for and telling them to get lost, he's not part of this. He's still just sitting there. Like, he doesn't have the energy to get up and like leave or say anything or participate in the scene at all.
He's completely passive.
Yeah.
And I don't think of him as actually passive in the sense that he gets pushed around by anybody throughout the film. But it's that he's not really there.
Right.
He's not able to be there. And it's really interesting. And it's really well put together. I mean, this is a movie with, I think, some professional actors and some not. And you can sort of tell by who's delivering the lines.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about, I've seen My Brother's Wedding as well, which is one of these things where it's like, there's probably a lot of non-professional actors here. The line delivery isn't like whatever, and it doesn't matter.
Right.
It absolutely doesn't matter. That's not really what we're going for here. Yeah, it's a movie I think I'm going to have to watch again just to start figuring out the flow.
Well, I was going to say real quick, too, as you were talking about actors, I did look up Casey Moore, who is credited as Stan's wife. I really actually don't remember if he says her name the whole time. And then Henry Sanders, who's playing Stan, both have went on with pretty fascinating careers. Casey, the actress, like, she actually is in Daughters of the Dust. We were just talking about the Julie Dash film in the early 90s. And then Sanders has been acting all the way up to Selma from a couple years ago and Roman J. Israel Esquire, Denzel Washington movie from a couple years back. So
yeah.
Right. But like you said, it's one of Burnett's kind of hallmarks is, like, again, I think going back to those Italian neorealism fascinations and study that, I would work with non-actors.
Yep.
And gets amazing performances out of non-actors.
Right.
Non-professionals, I should say.
Non-professionals, right? Yeah. I mean, you get you get a lot out of it, and it does, the impact is there.
Well, also it helps. He's not trying to make like a science fiction fantasy movie. That might be a little tougher with, non-professional actors maybe working with when we were with the green screen in the early 70s. But, like, you know what I mean? Like, he's making a gritty Italian neorealism film about a man working in a slaughterhouse in Watts in the early 70s. And if you have the right actors, like, oh, I know that character, or I know that type, or oh, I get the world you're working with here.
So, we've talked about sort of the children and sort of the patterns of their play, and how, it's this constant texture of the neighborhood. One of the things that was interesting to me about that is, in some ways, what you're seeing, you do really see the children as a separate sphere.
What do you mean?
Well, you see them having a real childhood.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's interesting contrasting with him, because he's sort of seen to have, like, his father sort of introduces his childhood as sort of cut short.
Yeah.
In terms of the expectations. That's not really true of his kids. I mean, his son is about the same age. His son is sort of all over the place and being kind of rebellious to a certain degree, but like obnoxious in sort of like a almost preteen kind of way.
Yeah.
But like, like that's the thing, is like, you really get this sort of, the children are, free to do as they want in a lot of ways, and free to run as they want. And there isn't a lot of sort of expectations on them. So you do get this feeling of a child's world.
Yeah.
And we get sort of images of that. We get a little bit, like, for instance, at the end of sort of a specifically female sphere, when his wife gets a visit from a friend who's pregnant and she's hanging out with her sort of girlfriends. Oh,
yeah.
We don't see a lot of that, because it's mainly sort of the man's sphere, as it were, that you're sort of seeing. So, like, there's just all these different layers of texture. But, this is what I was thinking of before, is there actually is an arc. Because by the end of the movie, so basically he and some of his friends and his daughter and his wife are going to go, I think, to the friend has some gambling at a racetrack to do. And I guess they're going along for the ride. They're leaving LA. And then midway through, their tire goes and they don't have
a spare.
Now, part of it is the one friend is giving the other one shit for this, right?
Oh, yeah, a lot.
But, one of the things you have to, and this is the friend who doesn't have the spare is not somebody who's totally together. But also, this sort of speaks to sort of the edge that they're on, right? Can he afford a spare? Probably not.
I was thinking that, because watching, I was like, oh, you spent the money on the engine that ended up breaking on the street.
Well, this is the other friend.
Buy it, but yeah.
Yeah, this is, his friend was helping him move that, but he wasn't actually, that wasn't his money per se. But yeah, so part of it is they do this, they get out of the house a little, they break their routine and monotony, even if it doesn't end up being fun. And when he gets back, you see him show affection for his wife, and they're looking at each other for the first time. And then you see her having a moment with her friends. And I don't think that's an accident, because she's having a moment of sort of relaxation. And he's at work. And I had sort of assumed that work was a lot of what was driving him down. But I think you're right. I think it's everything, right? It's everything. Yeah. It's the monotony of it all.
Well, think how energizing that scene is. I know it doesn't work out that way, but this is like their get away for a minute thing. Like, it's not right. You could call it a kind of a vacation, but it's not really. It's just, like you said, it's a break from the routine. They're out of their neighborhood. They're heading out, like, you're going to go do something. It doesn't work out, but
they do it.
Yeah, but there's still, like, it was something new, something energized them, something out of the routine, and then that has ripple effects over the next few scenes, which is how the movie ends up closing out.
Yeah. So part of it, but yeah, so you see him at work, and he is happier at work. I find what I like about this is that through all of this, there's actually an arc.
Yeah.
All that, and an arc too.
That should have been your critical quote for the movie, right on the poster.
I mean, I watched my brother's wedding, which in some ways I think hit me more. I need to watch this again, because it's one of those movies where, like, it feels sort of aimless, but there's a general direction and it's going in a particular direction a little more so. And then at the end, it sort of comes together and it hits you, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't feel quite as much that, but I definitely felt that, right? So he does bring you around. And I love that, because it shows, I think the craft on display in a movie like this is sort of awe-inspiring, because you really, at least for me, at somebody at my level, here I am doing a movie podcast, but I admit it, I can't see it. I'd have to sit down and really work through what he's doing. Why am I feeling this way? Because it's not actually just a series of random scenes. The use of music in this movie is really, really good. The needle drops are superb.
Yeah.
but they're just there and then they're gone. They're there, they're gone.
Well, because it's not a flashy. Well, I've mentioned Scorsese a couple of times. Like, Who's That Knocking at My Door? His master's thesis feature. Like, that's flashy. That's like, hey, look at all these film tricks I know, and I love it. That's not what Burnet's interested in doing here. He's going more that, bicycle thief, paisan kind of route of just like these small human moments that will accumulate over time, and he's just presenting them in a very, I think, seemingly simple, matter of fact way. But like you said, that's just the aesthetic he's chosen to communicate this story.
Right.
And I think, there's an accumulated power to that by the end. I also think it's done in such like a non-flashy way that the simplicity, and not that people do, I think this is pretty well regarded as a masterpiece and a classic, but like that could also be dismissed as like, well, nothing really happens. Because, he's filming, he's trying to depict ordinary life here, which is tough because as a cinema audience, we're trained to look for like a pattern and a plot, and then we expect, callbacks to patterns or references to it and payoffs like climaxes to those patterns in the plot, and that's not the realm of filmmaking he's working with here.
Yeah.
Although, like you said, there is a little bit of like an emotional arc and I think a payoff too. But one of the other things that I wrestle with watching films like this, which are like, known masterpiece level films that I haven't seen, well, I'm expecting to be like, whoa, like it's a masterpiece. Like it's supposed to hit me a certain way, which is my own expectation. It's not fair to put that on the film, but that's why I reference like watching it the first time. It kind of just like washes over me. You're like, oh, okay, I see what he's getting there. And I'm sure other people watch this and like deeply emotionally connect with it on the first viewing, but going through the second time, I was like, oh God, that is amazing. Oh, good. That's so gentle right here. Like once you kind of sit with it for a minute and once you see it the first time and you know what it is, for some reason, it was like working its magic on me more the second time.
I can believe that. So you're putting me in a weird position because I have no time to watch movies. I watched 3 movies this week, which is the best I've done. I'm probably more than the average person watches in a week, frankly. But for me, right. I used to watch them every day.
Yeah, it's frustrating you.
It's frustrating to me, and it's just, I just it's not getting the volume, not getting the flow. But also this quarter is worse than last quarter, and I'm trying to pick up momentum now. But like, so the time that I have to watch movies is sort of limited. But it's like you should probably watch Killer of Sheep again if you really want to absorb what this movie
really, like,
is.
You can get to it. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but like later, sometime in your life, it's definitely worth a revisit or two.
No, it has to be like
now.
It has to be now.
Well, if we weren't putting out a podcast, I guess you could have spent this time rewatching it. But
I know. See,
no, I think you're right. Kind of is like the final thought I wrote when I was watching this. Like I put in my film journal was like I feel like Burnet was able to capture what time passing in this specific neighborhood feels like, but also for all ages and all the genders as well. Because like you mentioned,
right.
like the wife and her friend there. Yeah, the camera. The main character is definitely Stan. Granted, there's like the subplot of like the children at play thing going on because that seems like the most significant other character or other scenes.
I would say adult women actually get the least. They do get something,
right?
But the kids and
But the moments that they have though, like the camera lingers, just enough to really like get your empathy or get your sympathies going. Like, these don't feel just like a side character that gets a couple lines. Like they feel like people.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's the sign of someone who really knows what they're doing as far as directing, but also just storytelling.
So much. I think this is just what I meant is like at the level of craft, there's so much intentionality that's so hard to. It's just so much intentionality with something that seems so simple and is actually really tricky.
Yes.
Really hard.
Yeah.
Really, really hard to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Do you have any other final thoughts, Isaac, besides the tricky intentionality of Charles Burnet's work here?
No. I think we've covered a lot of it. I'm really glad that we got into this movie. I think it's been on our radar for a long time. And, I think this is going to sort of be the year that I finally work my way through more of his there's a third of his movies that I've seen. And I'd like to see, To Sleep with Anger and then sort of work from there.
Yeah. I mean, he has 32 directing credits on IMDb, so there's a bit there. I don't know how much, what the availability is there, but
right.
you'd think once Killer Sheep was restored and re-released in the early 2000s, I assume, I have not checked on this, I would assume other film companies are like, oh shit, what else is this guy doing? Like, celebrated, American auteur here. Let's get all his stuff out, or available at least.
Right.
Probably should have looked that up ahead of time, but I'm just going to assume he's still got a few masterworks out there that are hard to come by at this point. But
I would bet that is actually the case.
Well, what have we got up next, Isaac?
So, we're going to continue our side semi-theme of Black History Month, which is looking specifically at Black auteurs, indie auteurs, as opposed to, there's a lot of other types of movies, but I think we're just sort of trying to look at things that are that's not as big in the mainstream. So we're going to be looking at Kathleen Collins' 1982's Losing Ground.
Indeed. Featuring the man we were just talking about a few minutes ago. That wasn't Charles Burnet.
Bill Gunn.
Mr. Bill Gunn. And also a little quick flashback to our October coverage in 2021 of the films of George Romero. We get Dwayne Jones, the star of Night of the Living Dead, in another feature film. Obviously, many, many years later. This is 1982.
Yeah, no, but gosh, it's going to be nice to see him in a movie again.
Absolutely. So until next time with Losing Ground, please be sure to rate and review the show in whatever podcast app you are using. And if you do enjoy the show, or even just one particular episode, feel free to share with a friend or two. We're also up and running on the usual social media stuff, so check the show notes for all of those links there. And until next time, I am Aaron.
And I am Isaac. And I always say stay safe out there. And there's so many things to stay safe from, to be frank. And I don't actually have anything novel this week, right? Like, it's just, apparently COVID's going down, and a lot of states are dropping mask mandates. And also, we're near peak death rates at the moment. So there's a concept called necropolitics, or you could look at, let's say, Ruth Wilson Gilmore's sort of state that abandons people. It's, she's a major sort of abolitionist, Marxist economic geographer. There's a lot of different ways of looking at what's being done to us right now. But it's really fucked up. So, keep at it, and also find pleasure in what you can, like great movies.